we have to win all the things, all the things, all the things.
Winning all the things. Hi there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I thought I'd take this Friday, here we are in mid-August, to talk about going back to school. And this season of Back to School is especially pointed because we are in a presidential election season, and we get to see firsthand who is behind the things standing in the way of our schools performing the function that they are supposed to perform, which is hopefully, at a bare minimum, getting our kids to be proficient in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but ideally becoming curious, capable adults that can go out into an ever-changing world and discover a meaningful life for themselves and have a certain amount of financial security and human flourishing. That, I think, is what we as parents want out of the education process. And unfortunately, most of us think that that's going to happen in school. But if you want to look to an embodiment of what stands in the way of our education system delivering on any of the things we hope it should, you can look no further than people like Randi Weingarten and the American Federation of Teachers, who, in this political climate, really get to show us all their true colors and their partisan nature. So let's take a look at her at a recent political rally that's masquerading as an annual conference for their organization.
The November elections will determine which path we take as a nation. Progress is indeed possible, but so is the eradication of the rights and freedoms we hold dear.
I'll tell you one progress that isn't possible or on the table for Randi: the progress towards any form of change in our education system, or progress towards you as a parent having any more flexibility in the school you can afford to send your child to or children to. Because she and her cohort are the single biggest enemies of anything like school choice or more options and innovation in education. The progress she's talking about here has nothing to do with education achievement, parental empowerment, or meeting our kids where they are in their needs to learn and grow.
It is seldom a dramatic event or attack that lets fascism in the door. The violence comes later, after they are voted in.
You know, I find this talk of fascism, especially coming from these people, so ironic, or should I say so rich, because the public school system in this country, as it currently is constituted, is essentially inspired by the proto-fascists of Prussia. These are the essentially military training units of the Prussian state that people like Horace Mann looked to for inspiration. And we're going to be doing actually a longer video to dig into that history, because you just have to quote these people and what they said their objectives were for American education to see that it had nothing to do with curiosity or advancing critical thinking or discovering your human potential. It had to do with treating our kids like clay to be molded. Quite literally, this is one of the essential sort of claims of an early organization by J.D. Rockefeller, that they want to mold our kids as political clay to be used towards their ends. It was fascistic in nature from the start. So all this talk from these people about fascism really misses the mark. If you want to look to the heart of fascism, look no further than the inspiration for the public school system itself, its structures, its strictures, the way in which we force our kids into completely unnatural and artificial experiences for 8 hours a day. That is fascistic. Trying to mode change between wildly different subjects, abruptly ended by a bell ringing and then being yelled at to move along and keep your books and go to the next thing, switch from English to math, now from math to social studies, now from social studies to environmental sciences. That's fascism for our kids, delivered 8 hours a day, every day of the week, throughout most of their year, throughout most of their life. And it hasn't changed one iota because of people like this.
When the history books are written about this moment, let them record that we the people, united, mobilized, and voted down this existential threat to democracy and freedom, that we continued the march for progress, that we laid the foundation for a better future, and that we sought to create a more perfect union. Progress is possible. Keep marching.
Keep marching.
Oh, the overwrought drama. Oh, the being a member of the March of History. I actually left out the most important part, which was this.
We endorse Kamala Harris for President of the United States. Now,
You should find this weird. You should find it weird that an organization, and they are not the only one, but that the organizations who are structured fundamentally as a kind of legal monopoly for people to work in certain school systems would endorse any candidate. What does endorsing political candidates have to do with running schools or being a good teacher or representing the interests of teachers? That seems nakedly partisan, does it not? I mean, it is definitionally partisan. They are a partisan organization. In fact, they are so nakedly partisan that a quick look at the numbers kind of lays it all out for you. This is the history of political giving for the American Federation of Teachers going back to 1990. Now, I know it's hard to see, but that line that looks pretty close to the zero on the x-axis, there's occasionally like a little bit of red. That's giving to Republicans. The rest is giving to Democrats. This is a wholly partisan operation. There's probably no school in this country that's as politically partisan and single party as the American Federation of Teachers giving suggests. So this is an organization that is fundamentally undemocratic. It is misrepresenting the worldview of its members. What about all the teachers who say, I don't like that, you're taking my money and funneling it into your partisan politics? They just are given the bird. Now, there was actually a case in the Supreme Court called the Janus decision, which made it technically illegal for them to forcibly just take that money, but the unions have made it very difficult for teachers to try to get out of this paycheck grab that is on by default. They are moving the goalposts at every opportunity to make sure they can hold on to their cash. Randy Weingarten's not alone, though. You know, in our political season, there's all kinds of crazy nonsense going on at the teachers' unions, and why not soak in it for a little while just to feel, what it looks like.
My name is Tilly Torres, and I'm an English teacher right here in Las Vegas. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher because I saw education for what it really was, the greatest instrument of social justice in this country.
Okay. Education as the greatest instrument of social justice in this country. There's two ways I think we can understand this statement. I think in the best possible light, she means that social justice should be understood as how do you lift people up at the margins? How do you redress inequalities in our society? And that education is the best way to do that. If you get somebody who is underprivileged in an underserved community and they get educated, they have a chance to build a great life and live the American dream. I do think that in her heart, that is what she's saying when she says education is an instrument of social justice. And to some extent, I agree with that. But then there's the fact that we all know what social justice also means. And this is not politically neutral. And she doesn't believe that either. So this is a vision that isn't just about redressing inequalities or providing opportunity. This is about a vision which has a communistic Marxist baseline, sort of infusing it, in which we can create revolutionary change in our society. Again, this goes back to those social tinkerers at the dawn of the public school system who believed they could use education not merely to do what we average Joe thinks education is, but to transform the public,
transform reality,
change the nature of
Man.
That is what the social justice movement in education is about. Now, people like James Lindsay have dug into this in deep ways. They point to thinkers like Paulo Freire and others who are quite explicit about this. We can talk about critical theory and all these other pedagogical sort of things that are quite radical and crazy. We can look at trans and gender stuff in school. All of this is under that umbrella of social justice. That is the Trojan horse for radicalism in our schools. And we as taxpayers are being forced to pay for it, whether we like it or not. And our ability to opt out of it is being opposed most vociferously by these people, these union thugs. Stand in your way of voting with your feet so that your kids can have an education that matches the values you care about. In my birthplace of Philadelphia, there's a, let's say, vociferous speech along similar lines that I think brings this to life. Well, let's just watch it.
We will remember who we are. We are the ones who helped to shape the heart of this nation's hopes and dreams.
Yes, you are the ones that shape our hopes and dreams. Sound like trying to mold our kids into the clay of their creations, that our kids are their toys to play with and shape?
We are the ones who hold steadfast to the belief of the plausibility of the possible. We are the heirs of all who did this work before us.
She's good on the word salad too. The plausibilities of the progress of the possible of the politically plaus. But the best word salad is yet to come.
We must keep going. NEA delegates, we can do this work. We must do this work. We get to do this work.
Here it comes.
We will do this work because our students are depending on us to win all the things. NEA, we have to win all the things, all the things, all the things. Our colleagues are depending on us to win all the things. Keep going, NEA. To preserve our democracy, we must win all the things. Delegates, we won't go back. We will keep going forward because we are the NEA. We are.
Whew. I'm not really sure which things she's talking about winning. Obviously, it's elections. That's clearly the thing number one, is win elections for the people that will line our pockets with the money we stole from you. That's one of the things that she's super pumped to win. But I'll tell you a thing that she's not super interested in winning. Winning being number one in educational outcomes on planet Earth, because we are number one in wealth and income per capita and quite a few things, but we aren't number one in educational outcomes along any metric that matters. We're not even in the top 10. That's not in all the things, though, I think, because educational spending in this country has been going up and up and up and up and up like this, while the actual outcomes have been flat for 50 years. One other thing they didn't win was representing us and our kids at a time of crisis. They were on the other side. The winning all the things in 2020 and 2021 was about winning a paycheck without teaching, winning a paycheck while staying home, while you had to scramble to figure out what to do with your kids or watch them struggle on Zoom. That's the thing they won. Here's Randy Weingarten being invited onto TV to pretend she's an epidemiologist.
If you don't have the testing, you don't know who has the virus. And then you have kids and families that are kids going cross-city, cross-state,
Right.
all this other stuff. And since you don't know where the vector is, you can be contaminating.
We learned very early in COVID that the virus had basically very minor risks to school-age children. It was functionally no worse than the standard flu. And we also learned pretty quickly that transmission wasn't stopped by the vaccines. These people stood in the way. They kept schools closed. They were the number one engine of keeping kids out of school, trapped at home without any alternative. They were in favor of using the pandemic for a whole myriad of unrelated political causes. just as we've seen right now, where they are basically just a political machine operation that has nothing to do with education. But the distance they are willing to travel away from the issue of actually delivering an education for our kids is quite vast. Randi Weingarten is willing to go halfway around the world to lecture us about God knows what that isn't trying to create a better education system for our kids.
So we just crossed the border into Poland from Ukraine this morning as the air raid sirens were on around the whole country. And, unfortunately, we got to experience what it was like to be in the bomb shelters and to have schools go from in-person, where they were waiting to greet us, to online. And they really wanted me to say to Americans, thank you for the weapons that they have gotten. Thank you for supporting them, as our union has tried to do in lots of different ways.
So there you have it. There's the priorities of the leader of one of the most powerful teachers unions in the country. Not fighting for you or the options for your family, but flying around the world on your dime to lecture us about foreign policy, of which she has no qualifications or any reason to be participating in. If you want to be mouthing off about that on Twitter, it's a free country, be my guest. But if this doesn't enrage you, there's something wrong with you. Because this should, as a parent, be the thing you think about the most. It really is. Because once your kids are school age, where they spend their time from an education perspective will be a very big part of their life. It will dominate their time. And that is why I and my wife have been absolutely maniacal about paying attention to the schools we put our son in. We have been well enough off to put him in private schools. But in the name of social justice, not everyone can afford that. And so what Randi Weingarten and her crew of cronies want to tell you under the guise of social justice is that you should only get to choose the school in the neighborhood that you can afford to live in. They want you to believe when it comes to educating our kids, we should suspend everything that makes everything else work. Competition, innovation, free entry, your ability to walk out the door if you don't like the service you're getting, and instead put it in their hands, the hands of a circular political machine, and then just shut up and be happy with it. We need more money. That is their number one claim. Oh, none of the kids in Chicago can meet basic proficiency in reading, writing, and arithmetic at grade level? Like none? Sorry, give us more money. You don't even get the choice. Look, the fact of the matter is that there is so much we need to rethink about education, especially in K through 12, that I can't cover it all in one of these Friday videos. When we look out there into the world and we see the kinds of pathologies that our kids are struggling with, mental health collapse, suicidality and depression, failure to launch, 1 out of 9 bringing their parents to their first job interview. This suggests that our process of maturation has broken down and that we are not setting up our kids to succeed as adults and thrive in a free society, let alone want to keep it free. That is what this channel is all about. That is the primary concern of mine when I think about what our education system is supposed to do. We shouldn't even have a system at all. What we should have is an ecosystem of opportunities and options as diverse as the people we are. And the number one force that stands in the way of that ecosystem taking shape are the teachers' unions of America. They have a unique legal monopolistic power that shouldn't exist. They should not be allowed to exist. They are not the same thing as private sector unions like the United Auto Workers Union in Detroit. They are something fundamentally, categorically different in kind. If you're someone who believes in the power and the importance of representing workers, if you believe in collective bargaining as a fundamental right, you don't need to be in favor of teachers' unions or any public sector union. And you have an unlikely advocate in opposing these entities, none other than FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He opposed public sector unions. And actually, in a letter called the Letter on the Resolution of Federation of Federal Employees Against Strikes in Federal Service, he wrote a couple things I want to read because they point to some of the problems with having the monopoly of government be in league with the monopoly of employment. All government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining, as usually understood, cannot be transplanted into the public service. It has its distinct and insurmountable limitations when applied to public personnel management. A strike of public employees manifests nothing less than an intent on their part to prevent or obstruct the operations of government until their demands are satisfied. Such action, looking towards the paralysis of government by those who have sworn to support it, is unthinkable and intolerable. End of quote. That is FDR, famed, celebrated president of progressive politics, champion of the New Deal. That should give you some indication of that we are dealing with something very, very different when we are talking about these organizations. And when he talks about the problem of striking, we saw what this looks like firsthand during the pandemic. It looks like this. Teachers union threatens safety strikes before Biden's speech. This is with the American Federation of Teachers adopted a resolution denouncing unsafe and unsound plans or the faulty implementation of plans. This is one of the many tactics they used to keep schools closed. But of course, it wasn't the only one. They also just used outright intimidation. One of the founding chapters of this particular union, the Chicago chapter, had this to say on Twitter: "The push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny." And here comes the less savory aspects of social justice back to the foreground once again. We should oppose all of this. I'm not saying you have to vote R instead of D. That's not what this is about. This is about how are the institutions of education in this country structured. They need to be fundamentally rethought. You're not going to change our entire political order. Neither am I. So what you as a parent have to decide for yourself is, what are you going to do for your kids? What are you going to do? Are you going to subject them to Chicago politics and a machine that fundamentally despises them or sees them as essentially a kind of cattle to exploit to line their pockets? That is the choice you make when you unthinkingly send them to these schools. And I'm not saying they won't have any good teachers. They will. But they will be subjected to a system designed by thugs and inspired by thuggery. So you need to think different. You need to take back your power over your kids' lives when it comes to their school. Probably the best thing to do, if you can make it work, is homeschool, or find a way to afford the local Catholic school. That's probably your next best option. They are more affordable than most private schools, and they're still not perfect. They're still too Prussian for me, but they're better than the union-run thuggery. They were open when the thugs were closed during COVID. Never forget that. And if you can manage it, put together something truly unique and creative that doesn't crush the soul of your kids 8 hours a day. It's out there. There are options. And more than ever, there's opportunities to come together and educate our kids in ways that reflect our values. I don't think there's anything more important we can do. And as we start yet another school year, amidst an election year, I want you to remember that where they walk in this fall is a way more important vote than the lever you pull in November. But what do you think? Did I go over the top on this one? Am I getting too nuts? I want to hear from you in the comments. Obviously, this is really important to me. It should be really important to you. I hope it is. And we will keep doing more stuff around education. It's really important. It's how we as dads and moms can save America. Have a great weekend.